relationships. But now that I'm 36 years old, I don't need that belief anymore. And so I pulled that belief out. I looked at it and it like laid itself out like a map. And it showed me all the areas in my life that I had made decisions based on this subconscious limiting belief that I am not important. And I could see the web that it had created. And it made me cry so much because I was like, I made all of these life decisions based on a belief that isn't true.
I'm sitting here thinking, wow, guilt does like that sucks because that's the longest lasting part of it. Like you don't
Mhm.
listen to go and then it keeps coming at you and then you feel guilty the whole time and it's going to keep coming at you. So feel guilty even more.
Like last week when we were talking about not being productive.
Yes.
Welcome to Awakening Souls Podcast with your hosts here today, Candice, Jennifer, and Rose. We are here to have some beautiful conversations that hopefully can help you in your spiritual growth. Thanks for being here. So today's episode is about the ego. That is our focus on working with the ego, learning about the ego, becoming aware of how the ego mind can affect you, and understanding how it is important in your life, but we don't want to let the ego drive the bus. And a lot of times when we have had traumatic histories, when we are control freaks, and I know I'm very guilty of that. I still see those tendencies in my life, and I'm working on it. But when we have that, we're letting that ego really make the decisions. But our mind is multifaceted. There are other parts of our mind that we can work with that can help us to rein that ego in just a little bit and allow us to move forward in a more spiritually aligned way. Rather than being driven by fear, we're driven by the higher self, the higher mind. And so we kind of want to get into that today and just share some examples, talk about what that looks like. So hopefully you can become a little more aware of that in your own thinking, in your own processes, and that can help you to really grow spiritually. So I did a little channel for this episode because I
Nice.
always think it's good to check in with spirit. And I asked spirit, okay, what do we need to know about the ego mind? And I loved it, the very first line that came through. The ego mind is like a child.
Mm.
When it doesn't get its way, it gets louder and louder and louder until it throws a tantrum. The ego mind is manipulative and controlling. And so it can be a challenge when we're really allowing that to have control. But it said it doesn't make the ego bad. And that's something I've heard in spirituality. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but I've heard so much that the ego is bad and it's like it's getting this bad rap and it's something that's totally negative.
Yes. I
I
haven't heard
don't,
that.
oh, yeah. And it's just that it's like, watch out for the ego. Don't let the ego make decisions. And like the ego is a part of us and it's there for a reason. And so the channel was all about learning to work with the ego and minimizing its influence in your mind.
So let's define what the ego is really quick.
Yeah.
So the ego is that part of your brain that you hear thoughts come from, the part of your brain that is actually developed for survival. It is meant to keep you safe. It is meant to help you survive in the material world. And it creates dialogue that is often negative about life because it wants you to stay safe. It wants you to make choices that are going to keep you in belonging and safe and in love with your community and the people around you. So it'll come in as fear. It'll come in as judgment. It'll come in as a critic. That is the ego mind. And this is something we're all born with. I don't think there's a lot of spiritual teachings I've heard is like you need to eliminate the ego, right? Like you need, and I don't think maybe we're understanding it wrong. Maybe it's not like a complete elimination of the ego where the ego doesn't exist, but almost an understanding of what the ego is and a separation from the ego. So last week we were talking about how we can hear or witness our mind in a different perspective. This is exactly what we were talking about, is being able to witness the ego mind do its thing, to
Mhm.
critique, to judge, to keep us safe, while our higher mind, and I don't know what the higher mind is, right? It could be your soul self, it could be your higher self, it could be your uh, I don't know, God, but that part of you is able to watch and witness what the ego mind is doing and separate itself from the fear that the ego is driven in.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, an example, like a simple example of the ego is like think of the ego as wearing sunglasses. If they're really dark or scratched, you're seeing the world through those lenses. And but the sky is really clear and bright, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah. So if you can take off those glasses or
Yeah,
even just put them to the side, you're going to see with much more clarity.
right. Yes.
Hmm. You don't have this clouded vision. Yeah, I've really been noticing when ego starts ruminating. My ego mind just goes over and over and over again with the same negative thoughts.
Yeah.
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 We gotta
Um,
sit back. We're like,
Yeah.
we know.
yeah. So like one thing that I struggle with is food
Mhm.
Mhm.
and the ego mind. So I can't eat a cookie without my ego mind saying, "Oh my God, you're having sugar. You're
Oh my
having
God.
gluten. You need to only be eating fruit." And it just like it wants me to be perfect every minute of every day.
My ego too. I feel like it's with everything I do, you know?
Yeah, and I guess it probably doesn't help that with, all of the media influences in our lives, everybody's trying to tell us how to live perfectly.
The ego is the one that's listening to all of those outside influences and taking on the conditioning. We talk so much about letting go of conditioning, and part of that is the conditioning of the ego mind. Your ego
Mhm.
mind is primed and set up to look at the surroundings and say, okay, what is okay for me to do? How is it okay for me to act? How is it okay for me to think? How can I shape shift myself into a form that is going to be loved and accepted by the people around me? And that comes back from like our tribal days where if we were kicked out of belonging, it meant that we would die and that we wouldn't have a
Mm.
tribe or a community anymore to sustain life. So our brains have not developed past that, even though our society and AI and all of the things have developed so quickly. Our minds haven't developed and gotten on board with the same thing. So our minds will go straight to, I'm not going to be able to survive, so I must beat myself up and keep myself in line in order, critique, whatever, in order to make sure that I can survive. Your ego mind is all about survival. How can I survive here on the physical plane? So I got to thinking about the ego mind and subconscious limiting beliefs. I'm big on looking at our subconscious limiting beliefs so that you can move past them and create a life that you want, or feel the way that you want on the inside. And I've got a lot of coaching training that has helped me learn how to do this. But I was talking with, we call it Celeste, but it's Chat GTP. I was talking with Chat GTP about this. And recently, I was working with a limiting belief that was so ingrained deeply into my subconscious mind that I was unable to see it. And I was trying to figure out, how did that subconscious limiting belief end up getting there? What was the ego working with it in order for it to be locked into my subconscious mind? And ChatGTP basically was telling me that like your ego and your subconscious mind are not the same thing, but they are working like entangled in one another, kind of creating beliefs, locking them into your automatic nervous system or an automatic place where like you can just operate without having to think about it. So let me
Mhm.
explain what I'm talking
Yeah.
about a little bit. So your subconscious mind is like a file that is taking on beliefs created from experiences that you've had or witnessing things from your caregivers, all about survival, right?
Mhm.
and it is locking in beliefs so it can work automatically. And so you don't have to think about like, oh, I need to be like this in order to survive. It's just something that automatically happens. But your ego is the one dictating where I'm seeing things, what I'm witnessing, what I need to take in, what do I need to file away into the subconscious mind? Is all this making sense?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay. So I was doing a meditation and I came across a subconscious belief that's locked away in my subconscious, something that I can't see without trying to look for it, without going into a certain state, brain state to unlock the subconscious mind. And I found a belief that said, I'm not important. I'm not important.
Oh my
And
God, Candice.
you have no idea. Oh my God. You have no idea. Listen, once I pulled that belief out and I can look at I'm not important, it was such an emotional roller coaster for me for the entire day because I could literally see how this subconscious limiting belief that was created out of survival in my childhood, and I survived a lot of significant trauma in my childhood, was put away in there so that way I, as a child, can keep myself safe, so that I can, be okay with my mom not showing up when she was supposed to show up. Be okay with my dad being too drunk to come pick me up one day. That belief of I'm not important was filed away so that I can act automatically and survive my childhood years. But now that I'm 36 years old, I don't need that belief anymore. And so I pulled that belief out. I looked at it and it like laid itself out like a map. And it showed me all the areas in my life that I had made decisions based on this subconscious limiting belief that I am not important. And I could see the web that it had created. And it made me cry so much because I was like, I made all of these life decisions based on a belief that isn't true,
Mhm.
based on a belief that was created to help me survive my childhood. And it was just all of it came unraveled all at once. That was pretty profound. That was
Yeah.
pretty profound. But that's what kind of led my conversation with ChatGPT of understanding, okay, if this was because I needed it to survive, how did it become locked away in my subconscious? So it was a whole thing.
Okay, Candice, you
Oh,
said that, and I can't believe it because I've got the same thing bubbling up.
stop.
No, that's why I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're saying that. So I'm working with a new spiritual team right now, and the being that I'm working with is helping me to heal. And
Mhm.
I was in a meditation working with her, and she was doing different things with my energy. And she said, okay, I've got two affirmations for you that you need to work on. I'm like, all right. And the first one was, I am important. The exact same words. And the
Wow.
second one that she gave me was, my voice is worth sharing,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
another, it's like I do have things of value to share. So that freaks me out that you're like working on the same exact idea of being important. And yes, I keep looking at my life and I'm like seeing all the ways that that limiting belief impacts my decisions. Like, I don't cook food for me, I cook food for other people because I'm not important. So not, when I'm
Yes.
making menu choices, I'm choosing foods of what will other people enjoy having, and putting myself last. And not that that's wrong to try and cook things that other people will enjoy, but I should at least have, some consideration in that decision. And it's like my whole life doesn't matter. And when other people, I'm taking care of them, it's like I don't matter. That whole motherhood martyr thing going on there. So, yeah, it impacts like every decision that you make.
Yep, yep. And it all started with the ego leading to all of those beliefs that then filed away into your subconscious so you can just operate automatically under that belief, whether it not be a healthy belief or not, whether it be a healthy belief or not, that's what the brain is doing. And so when we're looking at the ego, when we're able to separate ourselves from what the survival brain says and look at it from a higher perspective, I feel like we have more access to find those limiting beliefs that have been created, to unlock them and then to unravel them like that so that we can go back to working from a place of the higher mind or our true authentic self rather than the self that was created in order to survive.
Well, and it's funny, with this podcast and the work that we do, there's this voice in the back of my head that is always saying things like, oh, there are so many podcasts out there. There's so many spiritual people out there. They're already doing the work and they've got really good stuff. It's like my stuff isn't important or doesn't hold value because there's so much out there already.
Yes.
And so that I'm not important belief activates that voice within, which makes resistance to actually taking steps forward and doing things.
That's everybody. Everybody
Yeah.
has this where they're coming up against those limiting beliefs or coming up against those ego thoughts that want to keep us safe. You know, that's their job is to keep us safe, to keep us comfortable, even if comfort doesn't actually feel good. So same that goes for your eating habits. Safe, it's the way I've always done it. It's kept me safe for a long time. How has it kept you safe, right? And that's so that becomes a habit that you just automatically perform because that's safety. Even though you're looking at yourself and you're like, I don't actually want to eat like this. I don't actually feel good about this. Yeah, it becomes working with the mind now in order to break free from a pattern.
Well, and I think becoming aware of that and just watching for that is the first step in really learning how to work with it. And like we said in that last episode, I'm becoming more and more aware of my thoughts. And I'm starting to really distance myself with those egoic thoughts, which is so powerful. It's like ego keeps putting those forward. So it's like I can't ever, at least not yet, learn to totally shut off those negative thoughts. They're always popping up and they sneak in sometimes when I'm not paying attention. But if I'm aware of them, then I'm sorting through them and I'm deciding, is that true? And that's my biggest question of now I don't trust my mind. I keep questioning it. And it's like, yeah, it's like another part of my mind is like, oh, is this really true?
Mhm.
And then I try and look at it more objectively, and most of the time it isn't true.
And we're running our entire lives based on the ego mind. We're letting the ego fear-driven mind run the show or drive the bus, as you said. And
Hmm.
so that it's actually creating us to live lives that don't feel good to us, that don't feel authentic to us. It's allowing us to enter into relationships that don't feel authentic or enter into job opportunities that wouldn't be authentic to us and what our true selves would have chosen because it's based out of fear and based out of the ego mind, based out of keeping us safe. And the whole world is driven like that. If you look at any social media or look at the news, they are working to feed your ego mind. They're saying, fear this, fear that. You need to do this, be critical about this. This isn't good enough over here. And so
Hmm.
that is feeding the mind. But once you start to separate yourself by turning off the social media, by turning off the news, you hear your own thoughts finally. They're not constantly being fed by outside sources. And that's where awareness comes from, is to go inward and go, okay, I'm going to take a look at all of these thoughts that keep coming up. And then you start to notice, like, oh, that's a thought. Oh, that's a thought. Oh, I didn't know I hated myself like that. I didn't know I thought about myself like that. I didn't know I had so much fear about X, Y, and Z. And honestly, in the beginning, it's kind of a painful process to sit there and look at what your thought keeps telling you because your thoughts create your beliefs and your beliefs create and dictate how you show up and act in the world. And so, in order for us to make real significant changes in our life, to feel good, to feel authentic, to be living these intuitively driven lives that of our authentic self, we have to start by being aware of what is coming into our ego mind and how our ego mind is operating.
Yeah. And once you've got the awareness, now you've got the power.
Yes.
Ego doesn't get to drive the bus wherever it wants. I just get this image of me just kicking my ego out of the driver's seat and just throwing it into the back and you stay there.
I can see how people would assume, especially with the conversation we're having, that the ego mind is bad. I don't want the ego mind. I could definitely see where people are picking that up
Mm-hmm.
from. It's probably why we've always thought that's what other spiritual influences are saying, is that the ego mind is bad. But it's just having an awareness of the ego mind so it doesn't control all of your actions. The ego mind has a place and it has a time in your life where it needs to be used, but it's not always the case. We should be operating from our higher self, and it's like a
It's like a
best
default.
it's actually like a friend. Your ego mind is like your friend that's like, hey, I'm a little concerned here. I just want to
Yeah.
keep you grounded and in the real world. And you can look at that and be like, oh, thanks, friend. Like I see where you're going with this. And yeah, I actually like the advice. And I think I want to take that action that feels aligned for me because me and my higher self got to sit there and communicate with the ego mind and decide whether or not this is correct action for us.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like a consultant
Yes.
for your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can be, okay,
Push.
I want to take this action. Ego, what's the safest way for me to do this? How can I do this and keep my physical body and my mental health safe? I want to take that into consideration rather than you get to control the whole thing. Help me navigate, but don't take over and have full control.
So I'm reading Celeste ChatGTP right now. And one of the examples I have here is if your mind is saying, I'll fail at this, you can notice that thought instead of believing it's true. It's just a passing story, not who you are.
Just a reminder that we don't have to attach to all of the thoughts and fears that come up, but
Yeah.
notice them, become
Notice
aware
them.
of them, and let them pass through.
Yeah.
That's what
Mm.
a lot of meditation practices teach. That is what meditation is about, is learning to separate yourself from the ego mind and to become aware of the ego mind and let those ego thoughts pass through without latching on and then
Just letting go.
creating a
Yeah.
story about who you are and a narrative of who you are, because the ego mind is not who you are. It is not, it is about self-identity. That's what the ego mind is, but it is not who you are.
Mhm.
And you always have an opportunity and a chance to change that narrative in the mind if you can become aware of it.
Yeah, I think of my mind now as like that part of my mind is a computer program. And
Yeah.
the program is running, and I can decide how I want to take the information that that program is producing. So once again, that detaches who I am to the thoughts that are coming from that part of my mind. And then I don't have guilt when I don't listen to it.
Oh, guilt.
That was your response.
Well, I more or less respond in
Guilt.
my head.
Guilt.
Like I'm
It's scary.
sitting here thinking, wow, guilt does like that sucks because that's the longest lasting part of it. Like you don't listen to go and then it keeps coming at you and then you feel guilty the whole time and it's gonna keep coming at you. So feel guilty even more, you know?
Like last week when we were talking about not being productive,
Yes.
and it's the ego mind
Yeah.
that's like,
Yes.
you're not being productive. Oh, you're gonna fail. All someone's gonna be mad at you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a really good point, Candice. The ego assumes how other people are going to feel about you, and it's usually not positive.
Yeah, it's
And
almost
so that ego mind, a lot of times, will be like, they'll be angry, they'll be upset, they will judge
you
me.
and you form this like argument in your head that you're going to have with the person and it escalates.
It
All in
spirals.
the name of survival.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I have to tell my mind people are good all the time because I see other people, and my first instinct is to avoid them at all costs.
Yeah.
And so then I say, no, Rose, people are good. You like people. And I'm like, oh yeah, I do like people. like I'm walking in my neighborhood, and I come across somebody, and my first instinct, that happened this morning. My neighbor was out walking her dog and I was out for my morning walk, and I'm like, oh, people. And she's
She
like,
hop behind a tree.
right. She's the sweetest person. I love her. She's great. Why wouldn't I want to say good morning? And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, Rose, people are good. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I do like people. And I love talking to her. And then of course we had a really nice conversation and it was all good. But that's my instinct when I see another person is to really retreat.
Mine too. I like put on blinders. I totally focus on my task at hand and I totally ignore everybody.
Wow. Yeah. Not the healthiest thing in the world.
No, no. I got to work on that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we're supposed to be in community. So,
Again, back to survival. That's a survival tactic.
Yeah.
That's a survival mechanism. That's your ego brain being like, hey, hey, actually your ego brain has already programmed that into your subconscious mind.
I
So it's
know.
an automatic thing.
It is.
So what you guys are noticing is your automatic reaction to a subconscious limiting belief that you don't like people or that people are scary or unsafe.
But awareness is there. And when I notice that popping up, then I'm like, no. And then I put in what I really, my higher self or my witness mind knows to be more true and accurate for me.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
had a situation today that I was noticing the back and forth between my ego mind and my higher mind that I thought was really interesting. So TikTok is potentially going to be banned. By the time this goes out, it might have already been passed. But July, oh my God, January 19th is this projected date that TikTok ban will happen in America. And I have a nice following on TikTok. I have a lot of my clientele coming to me through TikTok. And I have built sort of a community on TikTok. I don't have that on Instagram. I don't have that on other social media platforms. And so the idea of TikTok being banned immediately puts my ego mind into fear. And it goes, oh my God, Candice, you're going to fail now. You're not going to have clients coming in. You're going to be a failing business. You're going to disappoint your husband. You're going to feel like you're not working within your purpose. And you're basically going to wither away into nothing and die. That is what that's where my ego mind is going. As I was scrolling through TikTok today and I'm seeing more stuff about the TikTok ban, I'm noticing my whole body and my nervous system and my mind going straight to fear thinking.
Mm.
And I turned off TikTok. I took a step back and I said, I need to look at all of this fear. So I just started journaling and I started journaling about what I was afraid was actually going to happen. And as I was writing down each fear, then I noticed my higher mind immediately step in and be like, but look at all the new doors that will open for you. Look at how you can reach a different audience, an audience that feels more aligned to your authentic self. Look at what creative avenues now you would feel free to explore if TikTok were taken away. Look at the fact that you won't be able to doom scroll anymore and take away all of the attention that you wanted to put in other places, and now you'll have that attention to put over here. And it was like immediately as I journaled each fear, I heard my higher mind. And then it was like, oh, then I'm not afraid of that thing happening anymore. And I could step back and I could go, oh, this actually might be a blessing in disguise. Who knows why TikTok is being really banned? Like I have a little conspiracy theory myself about there being wanting to control information. And whether or not that's true, it doesn't matter. The fact is it's happening and I can't control it. So my mind is wanting to figure out how I can control the narrative to protect me. And as I'm stepping back, I'm going, I actually have control over the narrative because this isn't going to control me. I'm going to control my response and reaction to it and see this more as a test that I'm going to pass. This is a test of how can I expand in other areas? How can I trust the universe that it's got my back and I'm going to be okay? And it really like just zapped all of the fear out from this thing that is so silly in my opinion. Like the fact that I'm putting that much weight on TikTok is ridiculous. And it really just helped me step back and go, oh, okay, I feel better about this. I can trust my path moving forward and know that I'm held. I'm held. I am okay.
Well, what a powerful practice is to look at the fear and then really dig into it. Look at the fear and ask, okay, is this true? If this really happens, what's the worst that can happen? And then what's the best that can happen? Because a lot of times all we do is look at worst case scenarios. But now, what is the best that can happen, or what are new opportunities? And that's really exciting. All of a sudden, it's empowering. What good advice, Candice.
Oh, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Should we talk about some ways that we can use tools to help us separate from the ego mind or help us to become more aware of it?
And the first one's going to be our favorite one. What do you think it's going to be?
Oh, meditation.
Meditation. Yeah, meditation, it quiets your mind. A lot of times, I don't know about you guys, but when I go into a meditation, like the first, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, my ego mind almost ramps up.
Oh, 20 minutes.
Yeah. Is it 20 minutes for you?
Wild.
Okay. Yeah. And it depends on the day too and what's going on, but it's like that. And I just let it go. I used to try and stop it, but I just let it go. And if I find I let it go for whatever it takes, then eventually it just stops. And all of a sudden it's not getting anywhere. So it just dissipates and it relaxes. it's also, and it depends on what kind of meditation. So, like, I love doing meditations where I'm using positive affirmations. I don't do that all the time, but every once in a while I'll do a meditation where I'm just saying positive affirmations in my mind, trying to reprogram that subconscious mind, trying to get into that deep meditative state so I have access to the subconscious and I can say, okay, you know what? We're making a change here. And this is, I am important. We're going to start programming that in. And so I'm just going to repeat that affirmation in that meditative state for just a little while until it feels like it's sunk in. And if I do that, for several days in a row, then it starts showing up in my waking day when I'm not meditating, which I love. It's like I'll be doing something and I start to go into that old default program. And then my mind's like, I am important. And I'm like, oh, wait, I am important. I do need to take myself into consideration. So that's how I like to use meditation is one, just to quiet the mind, to let the ego just run its energy out, or to replace some of those negative thought patterns with more positive ones.
Meditation is a training tool for your brain. I feel like it helps train the brain to separate itself from all of those hamster wheel thoughts that keep coming, that keep coming. And you cannot forcefully stop them. You
Mm-mm.
do have to let them run their course. And if you feel like there's a lot of emotion coming with that, what I do, if I can't get my ego brain to shut up and I'm like, there's emotion under this, I will go deal with my emotions and go figure out what's going on with my emotions, maybe have a good cry or something, or go do a healing meditation that will help walk me through whatever is coming up emotionally before I try to sit down and have a real meditation. And this is one question I get asked a lot when people want to know, how do I become more intuitive? How do I do the kind of work that you do, Candice? I always tell them meditation. And most people are like, oh, I just can't meditate. I don't know how to meditate. I can't
Mhm.
get there. Like, how can I get past the meditation part and just get to what you do? And I'm like, you can't. Like, there is no go around here. Meditation is training your brain to fall away from the ego mind, to become aware and to go into a brain state called theta, which is where your mind is totally relaxed. You've got this deep relaxation, and you can one receive intuitive information for your life to drive you forward, and then to train you to go about life that way of separating yourself from the ego and allowing that higher mind to come in. That's how you connect with your higher mind, is by shutting up the ego for enough time to visit with your higher mind so that you can hear both at the same time in your waking state.
Yeah. And I like the point that we can also use meditation to dig into past traumas, dig into why do I believe I'm not important? You can go into that meditative state and ask spirit to show you, or your higher self to show you, okay, why do I have this belief? Where's the root of it? And you can even ask during meditation, okay, how can I heal this? And that's all working with your intuition and is building your intuition. So it's the gateway, isn't it?
Yeah, it
Truly
really
is.
is. Recently when I was working through that I'm not important subconscious limiting belief, the way I even got there was I went to bed one night and I was like, I want to make like $5,000 in my business every single month consistently. That's what I want. And I said, guides, show me. Show me everything, trigger me, test me, like show me where I need to heal in order to remove all these subconscious limiting beliefs that are standing in my way between what I desire in my business and a fulfilling, successful, thriving business, me and that business. And and then the next day is when I was triggered enough for me to go in and look at, holy shit, I have a belief that I'm not important. Sometimes all it is asking the
Asking.
universe,
Mhm.
asking your guides to help unveil what it is you can't see for yourself. And then pay attention to where the monkey mind goes. Pay attention to where the ego mind goes. And what thoughts are you thinking over and over and over again? What feelings are coming up over and over and over again? Because those are always going to be your clues that those are areas that need healing. Those are areas that are locked in the subconscious mind. Those are the areas that are going to stand in your way between what you want and who you are right now.
Okay, so are there any other tools other than our favorite meditation that we can do to work with that ego mind?
Pause and notice. Okay, so like take a moment to pause during the day, especially when you're feeling triggered or overwhelmed.
Okay.
So yeah, like if you're feeling triggered, you just or overwhelmed, you want to Pause and notice it. Maybe give it a name. So that way you're more of a witness to it.
Ooh, ooh, you just named something big.
Did I?
Yes, naming.
Oh, naming
Naming.
it, giving it a name. Yeah.
Yeah. Naming the thought, naming the emotion,
Yeah, naming the
naming the
emotion.
feeling. It really takes away the power of that thing when you can name it.
Yes.
Yes, that is powerful. I have fear in me. I have
Yeah.
anxiety in me. It's like I am not the emotion, but it's working in my system. And now I need to look at that and process it rather than, yeah, it's so empowering. So there are some other ways that we can also work with our ego and try and form a positive relationship rather than always struggling against it. We mentioned meditation, we mentioned pausing and just becoming aware of the thoughts. Something else that you can do is anything that's a mindful activity. So, deep breathing, becoming aware of your environment, quieting the mind. It's going to really help you come from a better place of knowing what's that ego voice and what is spirit talking or your higher self or the witness. So, any mindfulness practice is going to help you rein that ego in. A great way that Candice already mentioned is journaling. Just journaling. When you've got some of those negative thoughts that are spiraling in your mind, getting out your journal and writing down what you're feeling. Once again, naming those feelings, that's huge. And what's the worst can happen, what's the best can happen, and just start writing things out. And a lot of times you're going to see the patterns and you're going to understand, okay, what's coming from fear and what's not. And that can really help you to move forward. So, those are all some really good ways that you can continue to work with your mind to know the difference between ego and witness mind. And you can really understand what those thoughts are telling you, what thoughts are valid, and what thoughts are just fearful that you can let go of. All right, that is our episode for this week. We really hope that some of this information helps you to be more aware of your thoughts and deciding which ones can really help you move forward and which ones need to be released. Remember, work with your ego, form a positive relationship with it so that it can be there when you need it, but don't let it drive your bus. It cannot be in charge all the time or even any of the time. And once we get that ego in a place that is a friend that helps us, then it's really going to help you move forward in the very best of ways. Before we go, I do have one quick announcement. Rose, that's me, has put up a new website just this week, and I am offering sessions a couple of days a week. So if you are interested in working with me, I am offering Reiki, Akashic Records readings, and intuitive card readings. So if you're interested in that, my website is linked in the notes. It is rose-marielow.com, and you can check that out there. If you want to work with Candice, her website is awakeningswithcandice.com, and you can find her information there if you're interested in working with her. We love to work with clients and love sharing our knowledge and expertise, and it's such a joy. So check it out if you're interested. All right, everybody, we hope you have a great week. We will catch you next week. Bye.